Well, thank you for all being here today. We've got a really large turnout, which I'm really happy about. I'm really excited that we have so many of you here, or maybe I should be a little worried that we have so many of us here dealing with stress. But I am really grateful to have this opportunity to talk to each of you about something that impacts all of us, and that's dealing with stress. And today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how to recognize stress in ourselves. We're going to identify the different types of stress and how we feel it in our body. And we're going to spend a lot of time really talking about then how do we cope with it and what do we do to help manage that stress. And as we have such a large group today, which again is really fantastic, I do think it might be a little harder to have a lot of discussions in this group and really have attention to everyone. But please feel free as we go through to put questions in the chat or to put your own coping skills in the chat as well as we talk and we discuss things today. And it is really, as we get started, it is really, we can't start any workshop without making sure you're all aware of what Blomquist Hill is and what we do. But if you're here today, I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with us. But as you know, we offer free and confidential counseling to all people who have our benefit through their employer. And not only that, the benefit is available to both you and family members that live in the home with you. So we help with any life challenges. People come in all the time to talk about stress, anxiety, depression, work-related issues. People will often come in for couples counseling, family issues, and sometimes people come in to talk about should I go back to school? I'm thinking about switching jobs. There's no issue too big or too small. So if you are, or anyone in your family that lives with you is looking for that support, feel free to come and set up an appointment with us. As Heather mentioned, I work primarily out of our downtown Salt Lake City office, but we have offices located all over Salt Lake or all over Utah. We have one in Ogden, Logan. We have one in Farmington, downtown Salt Lake, Murray, Draper, Orem, and then we have a team of virtual therapists who are available to do counseling available by phone or Zoom. And so we want to make it as convenient for you as possible. And in addition to that, we have a 24/7 crisis line. If things come up, we know that sometimes those crises don't always happen during business hours. We do have therapists available for crisis if you ever need that. And everything is confidential. We can't share anything. Your employer doesn't know if you use our services. The only time somebody would know if you used our services is if you shared that with them or we're telling other people about that, but your company doesn't know if you use our services. And probably the best part is there's no cost to use our services. So if at any point you have if you do need to use our services, it doesn't go through your insurance companies. There's no copays and deductibles. So we are happy to be here to provide that mental health support for any challenge that may be coming your way. All right, so with that, let's jump into our topic on dealing with stress and dealing with stress in a lot of different ways. And I know as we start today, it's January, and January is a really stressful month for a lot of us. We're coming off of for some of us, either the holidays were incredibly stressful because of family issues, loneliness, mental health issues ourselves. Or sometimes the holidays are really great, and then January's tough because we are dealing with it's always cloudy and dark outside, and we're dealing with seasonal affective disorder, or we have to get back to the grind of work, and all of those projects that were on hold from Thanksgiving until the holidays are busy and keeping us on our toes. And in addition to that, we've also got a lot of things like there's a lot of world events that cause us stress. Politics can be really exciting for some people and really stressful for others. And so that can cause a lot of stress. And then, of course, we're dealing with a lot of natural disasters that, are that weigh on our hearts, that we worry about as we worry about what's happening with the wildfires in California. And I know we work with a lot of first responders. So some of you may, have working with, I know some of our Utah first responders are working with the wildfires in California right now. And those kind of things add a lot of stress on a global level that a lot of us are dealing with. But in addition to that, we have our regular ups and downs, right? Not only are we dealing with some of those bigger world events that come up for us, we also deal with just our own personal life issues, right? Work, school, relationships, family, children, um, our finances. Um, we're maybe dealing with a family member who we're having to help a family member with chronic health issues, or we ourselves are dealing with some chronic issues. We've got our past traumas. We've got big things coming up in our lives. And those are things that, in addition to those world things that we're dealing with, can also really be weighing on us and causing stress as well. And of course, there can be a lot of different other things, not on this list, this list is not exclusive to the things that we might be dealing with. And one thing that I think is really important to acknowledge as we discuss this today is stress can impact us differently. Some of us may not be impacted at all or not be worried at all about what's happening in the world around us. And other of us might be quite worried about the war that's happening in Israel and Gaza or in Ukraine. Some of us may think, oh, that's unfortunate for California, but that's, I'm doing okay. And other people, it may be a large portion of what they're worried about, and that's okay. Some of us are able to handle things differently. Some things that might be big for me might not be big for somebody else. And so as we think about that today, it's important to judge if you have a coworker or a colleague or a family member that is expressing stress, you're like, well, that's not really a big deal. I think it's really important to just acknowledge that that it can be something stressful for somebody else, and what may be stressful for me today may not be stressful 6 months from now, and that all just depends on all the other things that I'm trying to juggle on my plate. So jumping into the different types of stress, one thing that we talk about is that I think is important for us to distinguish between is the difference between eustress and distress. Both are stress, right? Eustress, we typically define as being a positive stress. It motivates us. We need a little bit of motivation to get out of bed in the morning, right? We need a little bit of that pressure, of that deadline, of that big project or that school assignment, so I get it done. And what that does over time is that eustress or that positive stress pushes me to become a little bit stronger. It pushes my endurance. It helps me grow in certain ways. And eustress is typically seen within our is it's something that we're able to cope with and manage. We know some things that can be considered eustress are like a wedding or a buying a new home. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of time, a lot of things we need to get done. And of course, I've seen a lot of things that go from being eustress, good stress, transition into distress. I've seen those weddings go bad when, I've got this family member creating drama. It can easily go into distress. But we see this as basically eustress as being something that pushes us and helps us grow. And as I mentioned, all of us need a little bit of that to help us function. And when we look at things, I have a picture up here of this couple doing a plank. Planks aren't fun, but the more you're able to do it, it makes you stronger. And so that's how we typically define eustress. It can have a little bit of tension, a little bit of discomfort, but it's something we're able to cope with and can actually help us improve and strengthen ourselves over time. While most of us are here today is to talk about distress, that negative stress. And that negative stress is something that it tends to expand beyond our regular coping abilities. It can be a short-term thing, like maybe you have a big project due and you're not sleeping over it. You're having a hard time thinking about anything but that. Or it can be a long-term problem. Maybe we've got long-term chronic work issues, or maybe we've got chronic relationship issues, and that can wear and tear at us over time. Um, it feels unpleasant, and over time it decreases our performance. So eustress over time makes us better. Distress decreases our performance over time. And over time, it can lead to those mental and physical problems. And we'll talk more about recognizing those. So this here we call this a stress continuum. And I want you to pause as we're here today, and I want you to look at where you feel like you personally fit right now. Stress can be a continuum. Eustress would be considered in this green thriving area, right? And stress isn't black or white. And stress isn't like I can't function at all and or, everything's fine. There's a lot of gray area in between. So take a look at take a look at this scale here, this stress continuum, and think about where maybe you are right now. So green, we'd consider thriving. I'm doing okay. I've got more eustress. I'm maybe being pushed, but I'm calm and I'm steady. I'm able to manage what's on my plate. I'm able to take feedback well. I can focus, and it's maybe a lot on my plate, but I feel like I'm able to do this. It's not impacting my sleep and my appetite, but it is something that is having an impact on us. Surviving is that next level. That's the yellow category. And maybe that pressure is getting to us a little bit. We have a little bit more nervousness and sadness. Maybe our mood swings are starting to kick in. And maybe we're starting to drop the ball a little bit. Maybe starting to drop the ball on forgetting a meeting or leaving our dry cleaning at the dry cleaners for a month because we've just got so much on our plate. But it's not having a huge, super huge impact on us left. It is maybe we're starting to see an increased need of control, and we're not adjusting to change well. It's starting to impact our sleep. Maybe we're starting to enjoy activities a little bit less. Um, Starting to feel that muscle tension. That's where we feel stress, right? In our neck and our shoulders. That's a common thing people complain. We're surviving and we're getting through it, but it's starting to have an impact. The next category is orange, and orange would be something that's considered, it's persistent. It's like, maybe I'm surviving, but you know what? Once this project is over, I'll be okay. Once I, have this big project at home taken care of, I'll be all right. But struggling, it's been going on for a while, and I can't keep this up. So that increased nervousness and worry has maybe increased to fear and panic and anxiety. Or maybe we're feeling sad longer, we're exhausted more. It's starting to impact our performance in a lot of different ways. Maybe we're starting to isolate a little bit more, avoid interaction with coworkers. Those fatigue and the aches and pain and our sleep is getting more and more. And maybe we're starting to self-medicate by checking out, by numbing. Maybe we're scrolling on social media like more than we should. And maybe we're numbing with food or alcohol or other substances. And we're starting to maybe take it out on our relationship with others. And then the red category is we're in crisis. That stress has gone on long enough that we're disabled. We're not able to function well. Maybe we're starting to have panic attacks or nightmares. It's impacting us to a level that the ability to function is hard. And we are just not functioning the way we should. Here is another version of the stress continuum. This is a common stress model that is used in research and literature. You'll find in researching stress. And this one, they define it just a little bit differently. It's similar, but green is ready, yellow is reacting, orange is injured, ill, excuse me, ill is red. And so once we see, it's defined a little bit differently here, but similar categories. And recognizing this in yourself is something that is really important because, if one of the things that I'm going to mention again and again is self-awareness and where you are in stress is a powerful tool in helping you manage it. If we wait till we're ill and injured, or ill or injured, it's gonna be a deeper hole to dig out of. It's gonna be a little bit harder to get us to a healthier place. So if we can start noticing when we're in that yellow reacting phase and start implementing tools and doing things there, hopefully that helps us from it helps us avoid moving into the injured or ill categories here. And we can have we can have all sorts of stress in different ways, but it's really important to just be self-aware and think about where you are. And we were teaching this at a hospital recently, and one of the employees called and he said, "I need to talk to Natalie. I'm red. She'll know what that means. I'm in the red category. I need to get in right away." And I'm glad that they recognized they were in that spot and used that terminology because that was really what all they were able to recognize in that or use in that moment because everything else just seemed to be breaking down. So recognizing where you are, and if you are in orange or red, don't panic. It's all right. We'll talk about some tools, but that might also be a sign that we maybe need some additional support and additional resources to help us manage what's happening on our plates. So a little bit of biology as we jump into this as we talk about this as well. One of the things that we want to recognize is the impact that cortisol has on our body. Cortisol we name as the stress hormone. When our body perceives stress, it does two things. It releases the hormone ACTH, and that's got a much longer name, but that's for our purposes. We'll stick it with that. And it releases adrenaline and it releases cortisol. Now, this can be a very useful thing when we're under stress. If you are, let's say, you see some kind of a threat and your body releases cortisol, what it does is you'll see you breathe faster, your heart goes faster, your blood pressure increases, your pupils dilate because all of your senses are really engaged and alert and aware. And this is where, I'll regularly work with first responders. And I remember talking to one first responder who was involved in an unfortunate officer involved shooting, and where someone had came and started attacking them. They walked out of a house and started attacking them. And he talked about in that moment, his body released, of course, all of this adrenaline and all of this cortisol, which allowed him to assess for safety, to see if there were any bystanders nearby that he needed to protect, where he could get himself to a safe place, where his colleagues and his fellow officers were standing, and where everybody, what was going to be the best way to manage this situation. And he said that whole thing, maybe it felt like it was 10 minutes long, him being able to look at and assess all of those things, but in reality it was 15 seconds. And that's because our body is operating at that optimal level, and it is able to function really high and do really amazing things. This is where you'll also hear about those grandmothers who see a kid underneath the car wheel and they're able to magically lift up the car. It's because their body is is operating with so much adrenaline and cortisol that it's operating at a really superhuman like level. And that can definitely be a good thing in some circumstances. Where it can be a challenge is when maybe it's where our body is releasing too much cortisol, too much of the stress hormone over things that aren't life or death situations, but our body is operating under that stress. And what often happens is if we live in that area if we live in too much stress, we start to have different impacts on our well-being. Um, because cortisol raises it slows down digestion so that energy can be used to run or fight. It can lead to obesity and weight gain. It can lead to an imbalance in blood sugar and insulin resistance, heart disease. Again, you can see it's putting the body under stress. You start to have more pronounced gut issues and digestive issues. And we're sick all of the time. Inflammation rises. We can't sleep, and it impacts our memory and cognition. The body is not meant to live at those high stress levels long term. And so that's where if we're in too high of stress all the time, it can start to have a really negative impact. And here is in much more description on the impact that stress can have on the body. We've covered a lot of these, but for a lot of people, this is where they notice that they're stressed. Their brain may be able to like process all of the things that are going on, but they'll start to notice the tension in their neck and their shoulders. Or I know people that when they get really stressed out, they notice it in their digestive system. They have an upset stomach, or they're nauseous, or they experience just really difficult digestive problems. Um, and so that's how their body lets them know. But as you see here in this graph, that it can have if it causes inflammation, that can lead to skin issues, or it can decrease your immune system. So over time, it can start to have a really negative impact on the body. And then we want to walk up to kind of think about some of those emotional impacts that stress has on you as well. The desire for social isolation, unwillingness to engage in conversations. Sometimes I call this the I used to syndrome. I used to hang out with friends. I used to have this hobby. I used to do these things. And what's happened is over time, the stress levels or the problems in our life have taken over. And it can, and we the things that actually help us get put on the shelf, and then we no longer use those as a good coping skill. But if we get to that place and we realize, you know what, I am isolating and I'm not connecting with others, that can be a sign. And again, of course, there's the mental and emotional consequences as well: depression, anxiety, mood swings. I just had a crisis appointment this morning with a sweet person who has so much on their plate that they just noticed that they were in a lot. They were like, I'm angry and I'm not an angry person. And they just had so much stress on their plate that that was just something that was leading to things at them acting in ways that they don't necessarily do. So we'll see people like maybe they're having more conflict with coworkers, more angry, difficulty concentrating, or that anxiety and depression becomes unmanageable. So with that, you're like, yes, Natalie, we're here. That's why we're here, is we know about stress. That how do we do what do we do with it? And so that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about today. So as we do this, as I said, we've got quite a few of you here, so we may not have a whole lot of time to have discussions about what works for you, but please fill up the chat, because if you have a personal coping skill that really works well for you, and I'm going to put the caveat that it's a healthy coping skill, right? If you have personal coping skills or things that you have found that are helpful as we go through some of these skills, please put it in the chat, and hopefully through the things that we talk about today, that I talk about in this as some coping skills and things that you glean from the chat, there can be some really, hopefully there's something for you personally that can be a positive and a helpful tool for you. So what the way we're going to approach this, and I really had a hard time thinking about which way do I want to approach stress management, because there are so many different tools that we can use and that we can talk about in approaching stress. And the model that I decided to use was these 5 factors that have been research proven that if we have these in place, have been shown to really decrease stress in effective and healthy ways. So they are a sense of safety, calming, connection, self-efficacy, and hope. So we're going to spend time going through each of those just so you are aware of what's coming up. So let's talk first about safety. Now, if we are in an unsafe environment, it's hard to relax, right? You're not going to go to someone who has just lost their home in a fire and say, let's take some deep breaths and be calm. We need to make sure that they are safe first, right? And so same with us when we are under stress. We want to figure out ways that we can establish a sense of safety. And sometimes that safety may mean removing ourselves from a difficult situation, and or an unsafe situation, if that's in any case of like abuse or neglect or any toxic environment. And other times it might be preparing ourselves so that we are okay through the normal stressors of life. So as you think about it, like if you were doing a remodeling project in your house, you might, like if you're going to be tearing out or doing sanding on drywall, for example, you're probably going to put on a mask to make sure you're not breathing in all that dust. That's something you're doing to protect yourself in advance. And you might also want to think about that from a different, you're going to wear a hard hat if you're at risk of something falling on you, or steel-toed boots if you are, again, worried about those things, ear protection, eye protection. We want to think about, well, how do I do those things as well to make sure that I am creating a safe environment for myself? And that can look in a lot of different ways. Maybe it means if you're having a really overwhelming week, do you make sure your week is full of meetings and appointments and family obligations? Maybe helping you get through that and navigate that means you are creating like a meal plan in advance. You're meal prepping so that you don't have to think and you're not just going to the vending machine and getting whatever is, or whatever somebody's left out on the treat table to survive through the week food wise, because then you're going to feel even worse when you're eating like garbage, right? So maybe you're setting up a meal prep, or maybe you're making sure that you are building in breaks or have a vacation day planned. Maybe work isn't a safe place or a healthy place, or home's not a safe place. Is there something you can do to create safety in those environments? So maybe it's finding a place that feels safe. Like maybe if I have a really chaotic work environment, I know that there's a stairwell that I can go hide in for a few minutes and just take some deep breaths and decompress. Or I have a colleague here after in between therapy sessions, she likes to run the stairs to kind of get out some of that energy and get her mind set for the next therapy session that she's going to do. Um, Maybe you're setting up a playlist or going for a walk, or maybe it's like you're making time to find those safe places for you and making sure you're putting that energy and that effort into making sure that you have something that grounds you. So, a sense of safety can be anything that grounds you. For some people, it might be spending time with family and friends. If they're the source of your stress, it might be spending time in nature. It might be connecting with colleagues. It might be making sure you're connecting and having lunch with your colleagues or whatever it is, but you want to be doing something to create that sense of safety for yourself. This next one is a sense of calm. Calming, setting a sense of calm. Again, we can't have calm until we have safety. So we want to make sure we're safe first. But once we do have that, how do we implement more calm into our lives? And that is something that I think is there are a lot of different ways to incorporate that in your day. Some anxiety is normal and healthy, as I say here, but extended periods of heart rate, blood pressure, our body's not meant for that. Um, so we want to think about things that help engage the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the one that drives the fight or flight response. That's the one that accelerates your heart, helps you breathe more quickly, slows digestion so that you can run or fight or manage that stress. And that's, again, has its purpose, as we talked about earlier. But the parasympathetic nervous system is often called the rest and digest system. That's the one that heals after we've been through stress. So when we're having stressful days, we want to do what we can to help engage that parasympathetic nervous system to help our body heal from those stressful elements of our day. Now, there are a lot of ways we can do this. We could have a whole workshop just on this next section as well. Um, but we want to think about how we activate that 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 parasympathetic nervous system to calm the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, if you ever follow trends on TikTok, mental health trends on TikTok, that's all over the place these days. But again, what we're trying to do is how do we engage the calming part of our body? Some research shows that after a really traumatic or stressful event, it can take anywhere from 18 to 48 hours for your body to heal and get back to baseline after a really stressful or traumatic situation. And so there are things we can do to help trigger that. Now, I wouldn't be a therapist if I didn't talk about breathing, right? Talk about deep breathing. And there's a reason why we do that, because it works. The taking some slow, deep breaths is one of the fastest things we can do to engage the parasympathetic nervous system. There are a lot of different ways that you can go about that and do that. Um, but do the deep breathing, I should say. The military I know often teaches square breathing, which is where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, or whatever number is the most natural for you. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but one of the things that I think is really important and that actually activates that parasympathetic nervous system is to exhale longer than we're inhaling. Because remember, when we're engaged in the sympathetic nervous system in that fight or flight response, we're breathing more, our breathing's more shallow, our heart's beating faster. So if we are exhaling longer, that's sending a signal to the brain that we're not in danger and that we are actually, that it's okay to slow down that sympathetic fight or flight mode. So this is why I know there are thousands of articles that talk about the benefit of breathing. And so again, we want to think about those different things that can engage that calming system of that body, of the body. Now, also, a lot of times people talk about, you know what, Natalie, I am not a good meditation person. I can't, if you ask me to count my breaths, my brain is going every which way. That's perfectly normal. I'm always envious of those people who are able to do some deep breathing and clear their mind and do that meditation. And that's fantastic. If you're able to do that, that's great. If you are like me and many other people, you're trying to do those deep breaths and your brain is going to, what about, and I need to, and I have to do. And so this is where I like to incorporate the five senses into this process. The five senses, I'm going to talk about two different ways we can do this. And I see a lot of things in the chat. I can't read the chat right now, but I see a lot of comments in there. So I love that you're adding your ideas. And I think this section will hopefully add quite a few more. So one way that if you have a hard time when you are doing some deep breathing to kind of clear your brain, is to use the five senses. Now, the reason why we want to try to take a break from all of those anxious thoughts is because we're trying to interrupt that fight or flight system in the brain and the neural pathways in our brain that are in kind of like in that crisis mode. So if we can interrupt that thought pattern with something more peaceful and calm, that's another thing that will also engage the parasympathetic nervous system and help create a sense of calm. So one way to do that through using the five senses is to have is while you're doing that deep breathing, you can take this and say, what are five things that I see? What are four things that I can feel? Three things that I can touch. Feel and touch are the same thing. What are five things that I can see? Four things that I can hear? Three things I can touch? Two things I can smell, and one thing I can taste. You can do it in whatever order you want and whatever number you want. The whole point of it is to put your brain into something more mindful. So some ways that we'll do this is like maybe we're in an office space and we'll say, how many plugs do you see in here? And sometimes we'll also see something like, what are sorry, I just got distracted by those red marks on my screen, not sure what those are for. But sometimes it will be things like, how many colors of green can you see in the trees outside? Sometimes it can be something like, you want to have like taking a mint and focusing on that flavor as it dissolves in your mouth. And so that can be something that can be a helpful thing as well. So that's one way we can use the five senses. The goal is again to pull your brain away from those anxious thoughts, give it a little bit of a mental break, and think about things more peaceful. Another way to use the five senses is to develop a list of coping skills based on each of the five senses. And I encourage people to write them down because when you are stressed, I guarantee you your brain's not thinking, oh, here's the things that I can do to help me feel better, because your brain's in stress mode, right? So instead, what we want to do is we want to be able to have a list written down of things that are healthy coping skills for us. So when we're in those moments of high stress, we can go through it and say, no, this one doesn't work. This one doesn't work. I don't have time for this. I don't have money for this one, but I could do this. And it's already written out for you. Use it in your notes section of your phone, have it in a journal somewhere, whatever works for you. But using the five senses in a similar way, what you would do is like for sight, what are things that are calming? Maybe I am lucky enough to have a beautiful window here, and sometimes I will just look outside and look at the clouds, look at the sky, look at the mountains. Maybe it's watching a favorite YouTube video or spending time in the mountains, imagining your favorite vacation spot. Or maybe it's even watching some of those YouTube videos that are like peaceful mountain streams or something along those lines. One thing that I'm commonly hearing among clients that I see in therapy is the popularity of like ASMR videos. You know, the ones that are like power washing a video, or the yard guy who goes and cleans up yards that haven't been mowed in years, and people love them. You know, there's carpet cleaning videos. There's all sorts of different ways that people enjoy those, but it takes chaos into calm within a short period of time. And so you want things that are short and things that are long. Maybe sound, you've got a playlist. I know personally, music is a big thing for me. So I've got a playlist of music to pump me up when I need that extra energy, music to calm me down, music that is that is happy music and got happy lyrics, and music that is, having different playlists. Maybe hearing is the voice of someone, or playing that you care about and love, or ambient noise like rainfall or waterfall or white noise. Touch, this one I think is the most diverse. And this one can be exercise, right? It can be just paying attention. Research shows that one of the most effective things you can do for stress is exercise. Exercise burns the stress hormone cortisol. And so even 15 minutes of cardiovascular exercise has been shown to have really significant impacts on depression, anxiety, and stress. So it doesn't have to be a lot, 15 minutes, but just something that you're active. Touch might also be, um, it might be cuddling up in a warm, fuzzy blanket. I have a niece who loves anything silky. So she has a blanket that has a silk ruffle on it. And when she gets stressed out, she'll be rubbing that silk ruffle on her blanket. But it could also be, maybe it's journaling or those adult coloring books. Maybe it is petting an animal. There's a lot of research that shows that petting an animal also decreases stress levels. It could be kneading bread or dough or baking. It could be, there's so many things in touch that you can do, but having a list of different things that work for you, I think can be really helpful. Taste can be, again, taste can be having a mint, having a glass of water, and like paying attention if it's a cold glass of water, and paying attention how long you can feel that cold as you swallow. We there It can be having a comfort food. We don't want to eat our feelings away, and we definitely don't want to drink our feelings away with alcohol or other substances. But having a healthy, having a comfort food every now and then can be a totally fine coping skill. And then scents, that can be, I had a coworker at another office who she loved essential oils, and she would put a little dab of them on a little cotton ball next to her desk, and would have that scent coming throughout the day. And I had this wonderful little girl when we were doing this exercise a couple of years ago. She told me her favorite scent was cow manure. And I thought, oh my goodness, what? But for her, she said her parents owned a ranch, and the ranch was such a happy place for her that the smell of cow manure, she's like, I know it doesn't smell pleasant, but the smell of that reminds me of a very peaceful place. So there are a lot of different ways you can do that. Another little boy that I was working with told me his favorite scent was his Burt's Bees grapefruit chapstick. And he said, I know that my grapefruit chapstick the scent doesn't last long, but I put that on and it's a calming scent. So if you have a combination of these things, that can be a really, and again, like I said, have them written down. You've got them already written, and having a weekend where you Netflix and binge might not be an option, but maybe, watching a short video, or looking at pictures of your last vacation might be something to help decrease that stress. And I also encourage people to implement these coping skills throughout the day as well. Like, if you just take a minute between tasks. Maybe you've got meeting to meeting, patient to patient, chart to chart, activity to activity, and you just take a minute to do some deep breathing and maybe look at a silly meme, send a text message to somebody you love, listen to a song that makes you happy. Doing those kind of things might be a really great way to kind of, you do that several times throughout the day, and instead of the stress building up, it's building up, and then you're doing something to bring it back down. So instead of just kind of powerhousing through, you're taking a minute here or there, and that can have a really significant impact. Um, I see a lot of really great, comments in the chat on different things that you've done as stress techniques that you've used as well. So there are so many more, and we could have a lot of workshops on specific ones. But please keep adding different suggestions that you have in the chat as well that might fit into some of these categories that would be healthy ways to do that. All right, let's see here. The other thing we want to incorporate in calm is how do we incorporate rest into our day? And we sometimes just think about rest as being things like just rest of like a lot of us just fall into the trap of rest being I just scroll through my phone. I'm guilty of that, and that can have its purpose and its place. But we also want to think about different types of rest and things that are really going to rejuvenate us.
Oh.
And so one of the things that I think we think about rest is thinking about like physical rest can be naps and relaxation. Mental rest might be taking a break from the news and work, but listening to music, or it might be reading a book that's helpful. Emotional rest, social rest. Social rest might mean taking a break from people, but it might also mean spending time with others, knowing depending on how you recharge yourself. Creative rest and spiritual rest. Journaling, being in nature. We talk about spirituality as something that's greater than ourselves. And research shows again and again that having some type of spirituality in our lives has really beneficial impacts on happiness and well-being. And for some people, again, spirituality is something greater than ourselves. It's getting us out of here and out here, getting us out of our head and connecting with the world around us, or something bigger than ourselves. And for some people, that it means religion. Other people, it means connecting with Mother Nature or a higher power or connecting with their community, but finding some ways to connect spiritually. And then sensory rest, putting limits on your apps on your phones, turning off your devices. I know of groups that will often say at dinner time, everybody's phone goes into the basket and we're not going to touch them. Or we're going to have a phone-free Saturday or things like that, just allowing us that space to disconnect from all the noises of the world. All right. Now we want to talk about connectedness as that next tool that can help us really develop and help manage stress. And connectedness is a really powerful tool. We are social creatures. We're not meant to be alone. And being an introvert myself, I definitely need that quiet time, that alone time, and that space to recharge after a stressful day. Introverts often need some quiet time and downtime to recharge, and extroverts often recharge by being with others. And introverts often, they love other people and they enjoy their people, but they need that quiet downtime to help recharge. So taking a look at yourself from that perspective as well, but making sure that we're not isolating if we need that downtime, but also making sure we're not so connected that we don't have any of that quiet healing space either. And so when we think about social connectedness, again, research shows that connectedness is one of the strongest protective factors we have against stress injuries. And so that connectedness can look a lot of different ways. Maybe it means you have a small group of friends or a small group of family that you're close to, or just one person, or maybe it means you have a large group. But finding ways to connect with others is a really strong protective factor against stress. So that might mean making time to like scheduling that time for that game night, or taking that time to visit with your coworkers, or having that time to have work lunches with each other. It might mean engaging in a new club, a new wellness activity. Join that pickleball group you've been thinking about, or there's that knitting club or a book club. There are meetup.com is a great place to go to find like social groups. Like I've seen like hiking clubs on there, and other like we're going to have a dinner night, or just it's a great way to meet people if you're looking for ways to meet people and expand your social group. It might mean taking a class. Harmon's has wonderful cooking classes all the time. And there are all sorts of different classes that you can take and ways to build that connection with others. Connection allows us that ability to see that we're not operating in a silo, that we're not the only ones who are dealing with the hard and stressful things in life. And so it allows us that opportunity to vent and share those feelings and also connect and see that we're not alone in some of the things that we're going through. Now, when it comes to connectedness, it might also mean avoiding negative social interactions. And it might mean that we are limiting our time with people on social media that are a little dramatic. Or maybe it means if we find that we are comparing ourselves to others at work or on social media or our neighbors, that we're mindful of that and looking at that as well. Um, all right. This next area is a sense of self and collective efficacy. So this one feels like, what does this one mean? But this one is basically building, how do I build self-confidence and independence, the ability to manage what is coming in my life and know who I am. And this is an area that I feel like therapy can be really helpful for. Now, therapy can be for help, we can help and tailor a custom plan for you specifically in your life and your circumstances and your environment. Therapy can be a great place to come and develop a stress management plan together. But this is an area where we can do a lot of work as well. That when we have a sense of identity, that when we have confidence, we know our skills, we know our likes and dislikes and our strengths and weaknesses, that can help us navigate stress in a much more powerful way. Um, for example, I regularly hear people who will talk about like, well, I don't really know what my values are. I've just always kind of followed what my parents told me or what social media says or what my boss tells me is important, but I've never really actually stopped to think about what is important to me. Or I've had people say, well, like, I don't really know what my strengths are. I had a teacher once who told me that I would be really great in this field. So that's why I went in, but I don't really know what my strengths are. Or my parents once told me that I was really great at doing the dishes, which is why I see now they just wanted me to do the dishes, but I always thought I was great at the dishes, but I don't really know what my strengths are. And so therapy can be a really great place to help us identify and look at what some of those strengths and weaknesses are. And when we have that confidence, it's knowledge and power, right? I look at confidence as not being like, I love myself 100% and I know all great things about me. I look at confidence as kind of being a balance of knowing our strengths, but also an awareness of what our challenges and what our faults are. And when we're able to see that as a whole, we know ourselves well enough. I might know that I am really great at organization, but maybe I'm really not great at, let's say, getting to places on time. Knowing that about myself doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means that, like this, I'm aware of what things I need to work on, and I can tailor my life and my strengths, and also look at the areas like how I can improve those things that need to look at that need some maybe growth and strengthening. So being able to kind of take a look at ourselves and say, hey, I am, really great in these things and I've got a lot on my plate. How do I use my strengths to help me get through this stressful time that I've got going on? And I think also in this category, along that same line, is this concept of resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back when faced with stress, kind of like you stretch a rubber band, and then once you've done stretching it, it goes back to its original shape. And resilience is this ability to say, I have been through hard times, and I'll be able to get through them in the future as well. Sometimes it's hard for teenagers the first time they go through that breakup or that really hard thing in their life because it's the first time they're really facing a really difficult event. Wisdom and knowledge and experience, their parents are able to look back and say, you know what? I've been through 8 breakups myself. The first one's the worst, and here's how I got through the others. How this is how we can get through this too. And the more we go through things, the more we're able to say, hey, what worked really well last time and or what didn't work well and how do I use that through this time to help me get through that really, really hard thing. Now, the last thing in those components that help manage stress is a sense of hope. And this one I think is so we can't minimize the impact of this, is always having hope that things can get better. You know, there's a research study that shows that 95% of things we worry about don't happen. And for the 5% of things that do happen, 90% of those people felt like they handled it better than they thought they would, which tells us that we are much more capable than we think. And that the things that we worry about either aren't going to happen or we're able to manage it better than we think. And so sometimes just reminding our sense of ourself of that can be a really helpful thing to do. And remembering that like there's always good people. I love this quote by Mr. Rogers that, you know, when he was a boy and would see scary things in the news, my mother would look to me and say, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And that is true. In every difficult life situation, they're always good. We again, speaking of the wildfires in California, there are people from our own state of Utah and Unified Fire and other agencies who have volunteered their time to go and help. And whenever there's a dark time, there are always people who are trying to help. And same thing when we go through hard things is that dark times don't last. They do get better. And we may not know how, and we may not know when, but they do get better. And so when we think about hope, it is thinking about what is that thing that's greater than myself, that that I can grow from this, that I can learn from this, or that I can that this isn't going to last forever, and there is still good in the world despite the hard things that are happening to me or that are happening in the world. Now we have to be careful not to engage in like this, go into this toxic positivity place, like it's okay, you're going through this really hard time, but it's for the best. And sometimes it's okay to still be upset and sad that these hard things are happening to us. And acknowledge that it won't last forever, and there are ways we can get through that. And the very last thing that we do is with all of these tips and tools and that you've put in the chat and that we've talked about today, I think if I could add one thing to those five things that help manage stress, it would be acting with intention. If today we've been talking and there is some ideas that you've had, but we never do anything with them, things aren't going to change, right? And so we have to act with intention. Maybe the intention you take today is to put down that list of coping skills and you've got that somewhere that you know it's done. Maybe it means you're going to you're going to start taking that class or go to lunch with a coworker or you're going to do something. But if we don't act on something, things aren't likely to change. And so that's where think about the things that we've talked about today. As we've talked about these factors in recovery from adversity and stress, and we've talked about different ways to help yourself cope and manage and deal with things. I hope that there is some type of thing that you have taken away from this. And I want to challenge you to act on it, to do something with it, because that's when change happens. If I want to lose weight, I'm not going to do it by just thinking about it. I have to do some action. I have to actually work out, right? Or change my diet. If I want to make more friends, they're not just going to show up. I have to put some effort into things. And sometimes that's the scariest and hardest part, but I think one of the most important parts as we move through this. So just kind of again, a summary as I wrap up for today, we want to have safety, calm, connection with others, confidence or self-efficacy, and hope. And as we kind of go through, as we finish up, I want you to again kind of think about where you are on this continuum. And if you feel like that you need that extra support, please come in before it gets to the point where it is disabling. And if you are already in crisis and not able to function, it's not too late. Come in. There's a lot we can do, and there's a lot of really personalized tools that our great team. We have a team of over 40 therapists that can help with the challenges that you might be facing. So I'd hope that as we go through this, please don't hesitate to reach out and get that support where you need. If you're finding you have too much stress at work, maybe it means talking to a supervisor about how to balance your workload or productivity. Um, if it means that you need more personal time, talk to your family about ways to do that. And last, if you do, again, you need that help, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have therapists available Monday through Saturday and our 24/7 crisis line. And we have evening appointments, day appointments, and we do have someone that would be that great fit for you therapy wise. And yeah, I hope that, as we finish up, that there's been different things in the chat that's been helpful, or different tools and skills that you've picked up from this that you might um, take away from this. But I really appreciate all of you being here today, and thank you. And if you have any questions or comments, please, we've got just 1 minute left. I'm happy to answer anything if there's anything pressing, but thank you very much for being here today.